And this is the King and Queen as they make their way towards that Parliament chamber. And like I say, this is the first time that the King will give a speech to a joint session of the Italian Parliament, the first time a British monarch has done so. The speech will hail those UK-Italian relations and underlie those deep ties between the two countries. The first address by a British monarch to that joint sitting, only the fourth non-Italian to have addressed the chamber from the President's podium. Those preceding the late Pope, John Paul II, King Juan Carlos of Spain, King Felipe VI of Spain as well. Their Majesties greeted by the President of the Chamber of Deputies, President Lorenzo Fontana, and the President of the Senate and their Secretaries General, and they will accompany Charles and Camilla into the Parliament chamber. Guard of Honour also welcoming their Majesties as they make their way in. Later today, there will be a state banquet with around 150 guests selected for their contribution to both British and Italian relations and those joint relations between the two. As they make their way, it's worth considering the importance of this moment. A historic accolade for the monarch as an individual, but a key moment for the two countries. The White House under Donald Trump, the Trump administration decrying Europe many times, obviously hitting the European Union with those 20% tariffs on its exports to the United States, hitting the UK with 10% tariffs. But across the European continent, countries, governments, heads of state re-evaluating their relationships with the United States, but crucially their relationships with each other. And it's moments such as this that the royal family play that pivotal role on the world stage on behalf of the United Kingdom. The King, 76 years old, obviously no stranger to diplomatic events, pomp, circumstance, ceremony. He was the longest heir apparent in British history, serving as Prince of Wales, whilst his mother carried out these engagements, these duties. In her latter years, he increasingly took on some of that mantle for himself, that role for himself, often representing the Queen at the state opening of Parliament and at heads of Commonwealth nation meetings around the world. And now, in his own right as monarch, he follows just three other people to give an address from the President's podium of the Italian Parliament. Only those that have gone before, Pope John Paul II, King Juan Carlos of Spain, and King Felipe VI of Spain. Here are the royal couple, their Majesties, as they make their way from that state Bentley that was brought over ahead of this visit into the chamber. The King, so often in events like these, often starting his speeches and addresses with a few words or sentences in the host nation's language. It would not be unexpected to maybe hear a touch of Italian before he most likely continues in English. He is, of course, fluent in French and German and Welsh. But both him and also we've seen Prince William doing the same, utilising that deft diplomatic touch that they have developed over years to nod to the nation that they're visiting. Yesterday, the royal couple greeted by school children at the Colosseum as they looked at the most iconic of Italian venues and learnt more about the restoration of the Colosseum. They were joined by school children who were waving flags as the couple arrived. And amongst all of this, the King celebrating a very personal milestone, that 20th wedding anniversary. He had a private meeting with Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni earlier today, and also saw a performance of Shakespeare's Othello. And as is customary in these kind of occasions, these kind of events, symbolism, imagery, gifts between the two nations, that bell may well be used to bring Parliament's attention to him, although I don't think he'll really need to do that all that much. He was given a red carpet welcome and a guard of honour when he arrived at the start of this third day of the four-day royal tour of both Rome and Ravenna. And they appeared relaxed as posing for photographs, both him and Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla greeting small children earlier, waving Union flags as she visited a school in Rome. And as they make their way through the Parliament buildings, all eyes will be on the wording of this speech. Now, it's worth remembering, of course, that the King and Queen in moments like these operate under the guidance of the government and the Foreign Office, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And so whilst the comments the King makes in a personal capacity, whilst meeting members of the public and dignitaries, and often those honour guards are his own, the wording of this speech will be made in agreement with the government, in agreement with the Foreign Office. So we should expect no surprises, but we should expect an affirmation of that commitment between the two countries, an affirmation of the commitment that the United Kingdom has towards the European Union and the European continent more broadly, more widely. One could expect reference to the conflict and war in Ukraine, the ongoing war in Ukraine. Only yesterday, the Belgian Prime Minister met in Kiev with the Ukrainian leader, a sign, symbolism, if needed, of the continued European, pan-European commitment to Ukraine. It's just coming up to 2:45 local time in Rome. And the King and Queen will be guests of honour at a state banquet in the Italian capital this evening. They'll most likely rub shoulders with leading figures from Italian life, society and celebrity. There will also be British attendees at that reception too, people invited to honour their commitment to Italian-United Kingdom relations. And of course, whilst the King addresses this chamber in Rome, his youngest son Harry has his legal team addressing judges here in London as he continues the second day of his legal case against the state over his security arrangements when visiting the United Kingdom with his family. The contrast there, if needed, between father and son. Let's just show you some of these latest pictures now of the King and Queen. This is their third of the 4-day royal visit. Only last month, the King had to be hospitalised for a night due to adverse side effects from his ongoing treatment for cancer. He's, of course, 76 years old. He made headlines last year by being so open and public with his personal health. And we know that he is a workaholic. We know that he loves to be at the forefront of his national, civic and ceremonial duties. And he was frustrated to not be able to do them, but he continued with those key roles as head of state. But in recent months, that royal calendar filling up. More moments like this as he waved there a few moments ago from that balcony. Something that will come with a lot of first-hand experience, undoubtedly. He's done so from Buckingham Palace, the balcony there, on so many, many occasions, to well-wishers as flypasts from the RAF have passed over the skyline of London. Well, this time, waving to people in Rome as he prepares for this historic address to both chambers of the Italian Parliament, the first British monarch to do so, and only the fourth person to do so from the podium of the Italian president. The three men that have gone before him, the late Pope John Paul II, King Juan Carlos of Spain and King Felipe VI of Spain, the first three to take to that podium to address the Italian Parliament. And the Majesties were received ahead of this key moment by the President of the Chamber of Deputies and the President of the Senate, and they accompanied their Majesties through that main entrance into the Parliament building, and the Guard of Honour also welcoming the royal couple as they proceeded. It's a busy day. They met with George Maloney, the Prime Minister, earlier today. We also saw images of the Queen, Camilla, meeting with school children, and later there'll be a state banquet. And of course, it's a year of state banquets. We know that the King sent that letter carried by Sir Keir Starmer to Donald Trump that was opened in the White House in front of the world's press, inviting Donald Trump for an historic second state visit to the United Kingdom. And that's symbolic of the importance of these diplomatic events and how important they are to build connections and build bridges. Well, let's take a listen to some of the latest pictures. That was about 15 minutes or so ago when the royal couple arrived in that vehicle to the Italian Parliament. They are due to take their seats shortly, and the King due to take to that presidential podium to address the joint session of the Italian Parliament. It is also today their 20th wedding anniversary, and as a true sign of any good party, Queen Camilla was given a margarita on a visit to a school in Rome, honouring her 20th wedding anniversary to King Charles. She was pictured holding the box alongside a local Italian as they basked in the spring sunlight that's bathed Rome in recent days. Meanwhile, the King and Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister, were given a ceremonial red carpet welcome to effectively the Italian version of Chequers earlier today. They walked around that 17th century palace gardens, a military band who were on horseback lining up to greet the King against orange trees that then had views towards St. Peter's and, of course, the Vatican. The Vatican, where the Pope, currently recuperating from pneumonia, unable to receive the King and Queen. So there is no meeting between their Majesties and the Pope. But there is this historic speech given to both Houses of Parliament. Expect King Charles to make some of it in Italian. It's customary that he nods to the language of the host country. He is fluent in French, German and Welsh, and of course English. But I would expect him to deliver opening remarks in Italian. They'll then, after this, go on to a state banquet, an event that will, of course, highlight local food. Italy, no stranger to incredible cuisine, which will be laid out in full for the royal couple. Also will be laid out will be a guest list of celebrities, dignitaries, high society, the brightest and best of Italian life, but also of those that build and maintain bridges between the two nations, and expect business people as well to centre at the heart of that. As behind the scenes, behind the handshakes, the margarita pizzas, the joint sessions of Parliament, the flypasts by the air forces of both nations, is the diplomacy. There will be lots of sideline meetings, discussions, handshakes, agreements and connections made that are pivotal to events like this. And this is what the government argues the royal family does so well for the United Kingdom in a way that many other nations are envious of, is that soft power, that soft diplomacy. Well, the King and Queen have been given a warm reception throughout their trip to Italy. They posed for photos on Tuesday near the Colosseum, near the ancient site of the Temple of Venus as well. And they were lovingly called Carlo, Italian, of course, for Charles, from crowds waiting to see the royal couple. Local media are also interested in the state car. Obviously, there is a fleet and suite of state vehicles, but the state Bentley had been delivered ahead of this visit to Italy by the Royal Air Force. The claret-coloured state Bentley with the insignia and the flags flying from them. Meanwhile, in Buckingham Palace, whilst the Queen received her margarita pizza in Rome, there was a musical tribute to mark the royal couple's wedding anniversary. And the royal family's official X account posted that photo, that video of the guards playing that classic from 1981 of Madness, It Must Be Love. Well, these are the latest images of the King being greeted as they began their entry to the Italian Parliament, greeting them, the President of the Senate and the President of the Chamber of Deputies.
They originally were painted here 207. And of course, we suspended our proceedings because of your visit.
Of course. See? Yes, it's a good acoustic. But there is not only with voice, but con microfono.
So the right-wing
right
party sit on the right and the left.
Italiani e del Senato italiano di poter consegnare.
We're very proud on behalf of the Italian Senate and on behalf of the Italian people.
E tuttora mi risulta che nelle monete inglesi l'abbiamo esposta in onore.
Watching live images here of the Italian Parliament, day 3 of a 4-day visit, state visit on behalf of the British government to Italy. It's part of the continuing efforts by the government, the Labour government of Sir Keir Starmer, to bolster relations with EU countries following Brexit, of course, and also significant in the wider context of the Donald Trump presidency, the disruption that's caused throughout NATO members, Italy and the United Kingdom, both members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and also in recent days the impact of those tariffs, that deepening trade war, especially between the United States and China, but those waves washing across the world. And as you can see there in that image on the right-hand side of your screen, the King has been joined by the Foreign Secretary David Lammy throughout the course of this visit. He was greeted on the tarmac as the aircraft landed by the Foreign Secretary, also by the UK's ambassador to Italy, Edward Llewellyn, and a symbol there of how important these moments are. The King also pictured there meeting Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni has been a strong supporter of European efforts to support Ukraine. And with the war in Ukraine continuing in the east of the European continent, expect in this address to the Parliament some reference from His Majesty to that. Worth noting, of course, that when meeting dignitaries and foreign officials, members of the public and school children, shaking hands, meeting the public, that Charles and Camilla speak with their own words. But in moments such as this, these will be words written with the agreement of the UK government, the Foreign Office. He is there representing British interests, and as such, expect a script that will reflect the ongoing commitment between the United Kingdom and Italy. The King and Queen were due to visit Vatican City and to meet Pope Francis. That, though, was postponed in recent weeks due to the Pope's ill health. He continues to recover from pneumonia that left him in hospital for several weeks. The King, just last week, a week and a half ago, was taken to hospital himself following side effects due to his ongoing cancer treatment. And last week he did return to a full diary of official engagements, but they were adjusted slightly to give him time to rest ahead of this trip to Italy. I can tell you that the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has also just entered the Italian Parliament. And in doing so, he will take his seat to listen to the King give this historic address, the first British monarch to address both houses, the joint session of the Italian Parliament, the upper and the lower houses, which are of equal authority, members from both in attendance. And that speech will hail UK-Italian relations and underline the ties between our two nations. Only 4 non-Italian citizens have given an address to the chamber from the President's podium. The 3 men who preceded King Charles were Pope John Paul II, the late Pope, King Juan Carlos of Spain, and King Felipe VI of Spain, the 3 men to do so previously. And about 25 5 minutes ago, the King and Queen were received at the Chamber of Deputies, the entrance of, by the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Lorenzo Fontana, and the President of the Senate, Ignacio La Russa, and their Secretaries General, and they will be accompanying their Majesties as they make their way towards the Parliament chamber. You can see there the Italian flag and the flag with the yellow stars of the European Union too. And expect throughout the course of this speech, some of which most likely delivered in Italian, commitments to maintain and build relationships between the United Kingdom, the European Union, and also the wider European continent. Day 4 will see the final day, tomorrow, of the royal couple's 4-day state visit. They will move on from Rome, my apologies, but continue their tour through Italy. They do so on their 20th wedding anniversary too. And of course, back home, further challenges on a family level, on a personal level for the King. Last week on Friday, the palace forced to release a statement regarding fresh documents revealing details of Prince Andrew's business dealings with an alleged Chinese spy. Meanwhile, as the King makes his way through the Italian Parliament, his son, Prince Harry, is seated in the Royal Courts of Justice at the Court of Appeal as he continues his case against the state here in the UK, challenging security arrangements that were re-evaluated following him and Meghan stepping down as senior members, working members of the royal family in 2020. His previous case was dismissed and he was refused option to appeal, but the legal representatives for Prince Harry made a direct appeal to the Court of Appeal, and they are hearing those challenges today. Now, most of yesterday's event was televised. Today, in part behind closed doors for confidentiality purposes. But the contrast will be felt surely by the royal family of the father and son, currently in very different positions, engaged in very different engagements. The King, of course, no stranger to events such as these. 76-year-old monarch, the longest heir apparent in the history of the British royal family. He served as Prince of Wales whilst his mother, the late Queen, carried out events such as this. He will have listened, watched and learned, and of course carried out many visits, engagements and duties as Prince of Wales. And then increasingly towards the end of his mother's reign, he would act on behalf of the Queen. We saw him doing so at the state opening of Parliament. We saw him doing so representing the monarch at heads of government meetings of Commonwealth nations. And now, of course, he does so in his own right as monarch. And he does something that his mother never did, despite her record-breaking reign. She never addressed the joint sessions of the Italian Parliament. The King, though, the first British monarch to do so. We'll expect some of those opening remarks to be delivered in Italian before moving on to the rest of the speech in English. And you can see there the room full, the lower and upper houses of the Italian Parliament, which are of equal authority in attendance. The Italian President is Sergio Mattarella. The Italian Prime Minister is Giorgia Meloni. And let's take a listen as the houses rise for the arrival of King Charles and Queen Camilla. You're watching Sky News. It's just coming up to 2 o'clock.
Maestà, il Re e la Regina del Regno Unito di Gran Bretagna e Irlanda del Nord, signor Presidente del Senato, signori Ministri, ambasciatori, colleghi parlamentari, autorità tutte e gentili ospiti. Il Regno Unito e l'Italia sono legati da una storia di amicizia e di mutua ammirazione che affonda le proprie radici nei secoli. Il rapporto tra i nostri paesi è contraddistinto da una profonda fiducia nei valori della libertà e della democrazia, che trova nelle istituzioni parlamentari il suo più saldo presidio. È ancora vivo nella memoria degli italiani il viaggio che la regina Elisabetta II, alla quale va il nostro più affettuoso ricordo, compì qui a Roma nel 2000, in occasione del Giubileo inaugurato da San Giovanni Paolo II. Oggi, nell'anno del nuovo Giubileo, il Parlamento italiano è lieto di accogliere Sua Maestà Carlo III, primo re britannico a prendere la parola nella nostra Aula. Mi è inoltre particolarmente gradito salutare, a nome di tutti i colleghi parlamentari, anche Sua Maestà la Regina Consorte Camilla, proprio nella giornata in cui le loro Maestà festeggiano il 20° anniversario di matrimonio. La visita odierna segna un'ulteriore tappa nel cammino dei nostri paesi che si sviluppa nel segno giubilare della speranza. Questa stessa speranza tende infatti un filo invisibile che da Roma oltrepassa la Manica, legando le nostre nazioni. All'origine di quei valori vi è la Magna Carta del 1215, una pietra miliare del costituzionalismo europeo nella difesa delle libertà individuali e nella prevenzione di ogni forma di abuso da parte del potere. Animati dal desiderio di un rinnovamento civile, Italia e Regno Unito hanno affrontato insieme un percorso comune di crescita e di progresso.
You're watching live scenes from the Italian Parliament. The King Charles, shortly to address the joint houses of the Italian Parliament, the first time that a British monarch has done so. He will become only the fourth non-Italian to do so from the president's podium. Before him, Pope John Paul II, the late Pope, and also King Juan Carlos and King Felipe VI of Spain. And after the king took to his seat, the national anthem played, the British national anthem, followed then by the Italian national anthem, which is commonly known as the Song of the Italians. It was written back in 1847. It didn't become the provisional national anthem until 1946. And it was only after the turn of the millennium in recent years that it was officially adopted as the Italian national anthem. There's been rounds of applause already from the convened joint session of Parliament. The lower and upper house are of equal status and authority. The King was greeted by the President of the House of Deputies and the President of the Senate before making his way into the Parliament chamber. Arrived there in the State Bentley, the claret-coloured State Bentley, around 45 minutes ago. And he will make this historic address in front of the Italian Parliament, also in front of the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who's accompanied him on this trip, and of course other British dignitaries, including the UK Ambassador to Italy, Edward Llewellyn, who greeted their Majesties as they arrived and landed on the plane and made their way across the tarmac in Rome at the start of that four-day state visit. This is a historic moment for the King and for the two countries, but also a very personal moment as well, because today is his 20th wedding anniversary to Queen Camilla, the Queen also in attendance for this moment. Earlier today, to mark their personal milestone, she was presented in the most Italian way with a margherita pizza, bathed in Italian sunlight. And the spring sunlight has greeted the royal couple in the recent days. They have one final day today, and as these opening remarks are made in the Italian Parliament later this evening, there will be even more finery, even more pomp, even more pageantry at the state banquet between the two nations. Expect around 150 people to attend that. High society, civic society, celebrity from the Italian side. Guests also selected for their contribution to UK-Italian relations. As the applause rings out yet again for this welcome, which in part noted the royal families, the royal couple's wedding anniversary. Expect the King to deliver an address that confirms and commits to an enduring and ongoing relationship between the two countries. Expect a speech that references the UK's relationship with Europe and the European Union. Expect one that also references joint support for Ukraine, most likely. But this is a speech not written by the King, but is delivered by him on behalf of the government and the Foreign Office. And there is that speech as he prepares this historic moment.
Maestà Carlo III, Maestà Regina Camilla. È davvero per me un grande onore portare il saluto del Senato della Repubblica Italiana a questa cerimonia che considero sia veramente simbolica per il profondo legame esistente tra Italia e Regno Unito. Cercherò di non ripetere.
Has been greeted and met with the President of Italy, Sergio Mattarella. He spent this morning in the presence of the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, at the Italian version of Chequers. I think it's fair to say the pair were seen in an animated but also relaxed conversation. They were greeted by an honour guard on horseback, and there was views towards the Vatican and St. Peter's Basilica. Now, the King will not visit the Pope. The Pope, of course, recuperating from his hospitalisation due to that pneumonia infection he endured, and the Pope previously had had part of one of his lungs removed, so his health was under intense scrutiny. He now recuperating in Vatican City and unable to receive the king, but the Italian Parliament is able to receive the king, and they are doing so in a way that marks both his stature as the head of the royal family and the head of the nation, but also marking the enduring legacy that lasts between the two countries. And it comes at a moment when European and British relations are increasingly under the spotlight. Currently speaking is Ignazio La Russa, the president of the Italian Senate. As he does so, it's worth considering how important this is against the backdrop of the United States re-evaluating and reasserting its relationship with Europe as a continent, the European Union as a political grouping, and the rest of the world with those recent trade tariffs. The British government will be keen for this visit, four-day state visit, to build bridges, maintain existing ones, and deepen and further that relationship on a political, personal, diplomatic, defence, business, social, economic level. And this is what is often said the British family do so well, the royal family do so well, is that soft power, that soft diplomacy, behind the handshakes, very real outcomes for many, many metrics. As Ignazio La Russa speaks, the president of the Italian Senate, it's worth just remembering that only 3 men previously have addressed the Italian Parliament as non-Italians from the presidential podium. The late Pope, former Pope John Paul II, and 2 kings of Spain, Felipe and Carlos, Juan Carlos. And of course, his opening welcomes delivered in Italian, naturally. Expect the king to do the same. He is fluent in a flurry of languages, Welsh, French, German, but expect him to also deploy his linguistic skills to Italian, a nod to his host nation, something that he has done on many a visit, on many a state occasion, something we've seen his son, Prince of Wales, William do as well, following in his father's footsteps, something that is always so warmly received. Well, as the welcomes appear to be coming to an end, following the national anthem of both the United Kingdom and of Italy being played, we will shortly see the King take his place to deliver those remarks. The Italian national anthem, an interesting one, commonly known as the Song of the Italians. It was actually written back in 1847, but it was only 99 years later that it became the provisional national anthem, before officially being adopted in recent decades. Let's take a listen to King Charles address the Italian Parliament.
Presidenti del Senato e della Camera dei Deputati, membri del Governo, senatori, deputati, autorità, signore e signori. Sono enormemente onorato di essere stato invitato qui oggi e molto grato al Presidente Mattarella per il suo gentile invito a compiere una visita di Stato in Italia. È molto importante per la Regina e per me tornare in Italia per la nostra prima visita dopo l'incoronazione. Il momento è ancora più speciale per entrambi, dato che oggi ricorre anche il nostro 20° anniversario di matrimonio. E peraltro spero di non stare rovinando la lingua di Dante. Così tanto da non essere più invitato in Italia. Above all, it is a signal honor to have been asked to speak to you all this afternoon. The first time that a British sovereign has addressed the entire Italian Parliament, this fundamental democratic institution. Italy is, as I hope you know, a country very dear to my heart and that of the Queen, as it is to so many of our countrymen and women. I have made 18 official visits over the past 40 years to the Bel Paese. It has been one of the pleasures of my life to come to know this irresistible country. And from Turin to Palermo, Verona to Naples, Florence to Trieste, I have learned a little more about this nation and have come to admire it even more. Like any old friend, I have been with you at happier moments and sadder moments in your national life. For instance, I will never forget my visit to Venice with the Queen in 2009, where we saw the magnificently restored La Fenice Opera House, or to Amatrice in 2017 in the aftermath of that tragic earthquake. So I am here today, ladies and gentlemen, with one purpose: to reaffirm the deep friendship between the United Kingdom and Italy, and to pledge to do all in my power to strengthen that friendship even further in the time that is granted to me as king. Our ties go back over 2 millennia to those ancient Roman visitors who arrived on our windswept shores. It was the Romans who gave Britons the idea of putting a king's head on coins. So I'm especially grateful to them. My own coronation in Westminster Abbey took place on the famous Cosmati pavement laid by British and Italian craftsmen in 1268, a shared foundation indeed. And another foundation in which Britain is proud to have played its part is the support our country lent to the unification of Italy. As Garibaldi landed near Marsala in Sicily in May 1860, 2 Royal Navy warships stood watch. Garibaldi was, as you know, hugely admired in Britain. When he visited in 1864 to thank the British people for their support, Garibaldi mania gripped the entire country. Some 500,000 people came to greet him in London. There was even a biscuit named after Garibaldi, the ultimate mark of British esteem. Many of the heroes of Italy's unification, including Cavour and Mazzini, spent time in the United Kingdom. Through the centuries, ever since, Italian merchants docked in Southampton in the 14th century, and moneylenders from northern Italy settled in the appropriately named Lombard Street in London, our peoples have traded with each other, inspired each other, learnt from each other. From the wonders of the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution, to scientific pioneers such as Guglielmo Marconi, who refined his genius in the UK before transforming the world. Nearly a third of Shakespeare's plays were set here in Italy, just as Italian artists have drawn inspiration from the Bard. And we have benefited hugely from your influence over what we wear, what we drink, and what we eat. I can only hope you will forgive us for occasionally corrupting your wonderful cuisine. We do so, I promise you, with the greatest possible affection. So we are two peoples and two nations whose stories are deeply intertwined, including, of course, with that of our European continent. We are both, after all, European countries. Yesterday, I laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Inscribed on its marble are words recalling the British forces who fought alongside Italian forces in the First World War. In a few weeks' time, we will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. We will remember the terrible price of war and of the precious gift of peace. At Anzio and Monte Cassino last year, and in Sicily the year before, we have remembered the British and Allied servicemen who gave their lives in the liberation of this country 80 years before. Including more than 45,000 from Commonwealth nations and almost 30,000 from the United Kingdom. My grandfather, King George VI, visited British and Allied troops in July and August 1944, staying at an HQ near Arezzo. Tomorrow, in Ravenna, as King of the United Kingdom and of Canada, I will have the great honor of commemorating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of that province, together with President Mattarella, in which British and Canadian forces played a key role. And as head of the Commonwealth, it will be my signal privilege to recall the indispensable role played by many troops from the Commonwealth as well as other allied nations. And we remember, too, the terrible suffering of the Italian civilian population, as well as the heroism of the resistance, including Paola Del Din, trained by the Special Operations Executive and dropped by parachute to carry out her mission in support of the Allies 80 years ago today. I know that we are all thinking of Paola, now 101, on this day, and salute her courage. Permettetemi anche di esprimere la nostra profonda gratitudine alle molte centinaia di coraggiosi civili italiani che hanno dato rifugio ai soldati britannici e alleati, rischiando così la propria vita. Today, sadly, the echoes of those times, which we fervently hoped had been consigned to history, reverberate across our continent. Our younger generations can now see in the news every day on their smartphones and tablets that peace is never to be taken for granted. Britain and Italy stand today united in defense of the democratic values we share. Our countries have both stood by Ukraine in her hour of need and welcomed many thousands of Ukrainians requiring shelter. Our armed forces stand side by side in NATO. We are grateful beyond measure for the role Italy plays in hosting key NATO bases and taking a leading role in so many overseas operations. In just a few weeks' time, the Royal Navy's Carrier Strike Group, led by the aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales, will exercise alongside Italian forces in the Mediterranean, a powerful symbol of our cooperation. So too is our project to build our next generation fighter aircraft together through the Global Combat Air Programme alongside Japan. It will generate thousands of jobs in our countries and speaks volumes about the trust we place in each other. We work closely together in the G7, as we did during your G7 presidency last year, whose ministerial meetings set a new record for energy and activism. Just as we stand together in defense of our values, so too we stand together in defense of our planet. From the droughts in Sicily to the floods in Somerset, both our countries are already seeing the ever more damaging effects of climate change. The last time I spoke in this Parliament building was to a special meeting devoted to climate change. I can hardly believe it is 16 years ago now. So I hope you will forgive me for saying that the warnings I offered then about the urgency of the climate challenge are depressingly being borne out by events. Extreme storms, normally seen once in a generation, now characterize every year. Countless precious plant and animal species face extinction in our lifetimes. So much is at stake. Italy's own natural heritage is blessed with extraordinary riches. Indeed, Italy remains home to the highest number of animal species in Europe. Perhaps Rome's greatest poet, Virgil, understood profoundly the respect that was due to nature. He was, it might be said, the father of sustainable farming, a cause I've supported my whole life. In his Georgics, he spoke about respecting the natural cycles of the land, the importance of pollination by bees, soil conservation, and even the value of composting and organic matter. For example, this from a well-known Italian translation of Book 1. Perché non ti spiaccia saturare I terreni aridi con grasso letame, così anche mutando a coltura. I campi riposano e frattanto, sebbene inarata, la terra ti darà il suo frutto. So it is deeply encouraging to see both our countries working together to tackle biodiversity loss, and to cut emissions. I can only applaud Italian entrepreneurs for their pioneering achievements, from the world's first geothermal power plant to the first nationwide rollout of smart meters. Earlier today, I was delighted to meet with Italian and British business leaders whose collaboration, innovation, and investment in clean growth are so vital to our energy transition. Upon their success, all our futures depend. Ladies and gentlemen, al centro di tutto ciò che ho descritto, che un denominatore comune, un filo conduttore, la nostra risorsa più grande, i nostri cittadini. It is our citizens, and especially our young people, who are adding piece by piece to the intricate mosaic that makes up the relationship between our countries. Much of that is thanks to over 450,000 Italians who make their home in the United Kingdom, across Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England, as well as to the tens of thousands of British citizens who live across Italy and the millions who visit in each direction. We are inordinately proud of the fact that London is the city with the highest number of Italians living overseas. Our business ties are flourishing, from green power to life sciences, from aerospace to services. The UK is the 5th largest investor in Italy, and last year Italy was the UK's 6th largest source of foreign direct investment projects, figures which speak for themselves. Our cultures continue to have a huge impact on each other. Tomorrow I look forward to seeing this in Ravenna, where Byron is remembered fondly alongside Dante, and to seeing the wonderful Byzantine mosaics of that beautiful city. Where 200 years ago we sent poets, today we delight in each other's music, whether it is the wonder of Italian opera at Covent Garden or Ed Sheeran at the Stadio Olimpico. Ladies and gentlemen, Italy will always be at my heart, just as my beloved mother never forgot her wonderful 25th birthday at Tivoli in 1951, or her stop in Capaci many years later in 1992, where she paid tribute just days after his murder to your legendary anti-mafia prosecutor, Giovanni Falcone. Must have been a remarkable man, Falcone.
La cerimonia è terminata. I gentili ospiti.
It's a joke.
Signore e signori, i nostri due paesi si trovano alle estremità del continente europeo. Il nostro è un insieme di isole spazzate dal vento. Il vostro una penisola Spacciata del Sole. Different in so many ways. And I'm nearly finished. But we have found, I believe, over the years, that those differences complement each other rather well. That has been true in centuries past, and it is emphatically true today. Let that be the spirit in which our two nations come together to approach the future. Fiduciosi che qualunque siano le sfide e le incertezze che inevitabilmente affrontiamo come nazioni, nel nostro continente e oltre, ora e in futuro, possiamo superarle insieme e lo faremo insieme. E quando lo avremo fatto, potremo dire con Dante, e quindi uscimo a rivedere le stelle. Grazie.
King Charles there receiving applause and a standing ovation as he concludes that historic address, the first by a British monarch to a joint session of the Italian Parliament. A speech that began in Italian and ended the same way. In Italian, he said it was an enormous honour to be there today. There was smile and nods and applause as he referred his 20th wedding anniversary. And there was laughter as he said he would continue in English. And it was a speech that referenced everything from his 18 official visits over 40 years, to the time his mother spent her 25th birthday in Italy, to the joint commitment that the United Kingdom, Italy and Japan have over the Global Combat Aircraft Programme, to Italy's presidency of the G7 partnership, to the time 16 years ago when he last gave an address in the Italian Parliament building referencing climate change, and he noted the warnings he made then regarding extreme weather and extinctions were happening now. He noted that London was the city with the highest number of Italians anywhere in the world living overseas, and also said of the time that European countries have come together to support Ukraine in its battle against Russia. And these are the latest images of that address. Only the fourth non-Italian citizen to speak from the president's podium. He talked of the joint support to shelter and also support Ukraine, of NATO, of the bases, key bases that are on Italian territory, of the joint UK and Italian naval exercises that will take place in coming weeks, and of the fact that the two nations stand together in the defence of the planet with the ever more damaging effects of climate change. A speech that was wide-ranging, but confirmed, reaffirmed, recommitted and renewed that relationship, that partnership, that enduring legacy. And in one or two moments, there was that wry smile that the king is known for. He noted that Romans gave the ancient Britons the idea of putting a king's head on a coin. He said he was grateful for that idea. And he apologised that if Britain ever corrupts Italian cuisine, then it's done with the greatest possible affection. More to come on Sky News.